I was born in England, in Lancashire, in 1921. We got our first radio when I was 9 years old. Shortly afterwards, Medgar Evers wrote his famous monologue, Albert and the Lion, made famous by England's great comedian Stanley Holloway, over the radio. My Lancashire dialect is a little rusty after so many years in the States, but here goes. Albert and the Lion. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool that's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. A grand little lad were young Albert, all dressed in his best, quite a swell, with a stick with an horse's head handle, the finest that Woolworths could sell. They didn't think much of the ocean. The waves, they were piddling and small. There were no shipwrecks and nobody drowned, in fact nothing to laugh at all. So seeking for further amusement, they paid and went into the zoo. There were lions and tigers and camels and old ale and sandwiches too. There was one great big lion named Wallace. His nose was all covered with scars. He lay in a somnolent posture, the side of his face on the bars. Now Albert had heard about lions, how they was ferocious and wild, and to see Wallace lying so quiet just didn't seem right to the child. So straightway the brave little fellow, not feeling a morsel of fear, took his stick with the horse's head handle and he shoved it in Wallace's ear. You could see that the lion didn't like it, for giving a bit of a roll, he pulled Albert into the cage with him and swallowed the little lad whole. Now father, who'd seen the occurrence and didn't know what to do next, said, "Mother, yon lion ate Albert." And mother said, "Well, I am vexed." Now Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom, quite rightly, when all's said and done, complained to the animal keeper that the lion had eaten their son. The keeper was quite nice about it. He said, "What a nasty mishap. Are you sure it was your boy he ate?" Pa said, "Am I sure? There's his cap." The manager had to be sent for. He came and he said, "What's to do?" Pa said, "Yon lion ate Albert, and him in his Sunday clothes too." Ma said, "That's right, young fella. I think it's a shame and a sin for a lion to go and eat Albert, and after we've paid to come in." The manager wanted no trouble. He pulled out his purse right away, saying, "How much to settle the matter?" Pa said, "What do you usually pay?" But mother had turned a bit awkward when she thought where her Albert had gone. She said, "No, someone's got to be summoned." So that was decided upon. Off they went to the police station in front of this magistrate chap. They told him what happened to Albert and proved it by showing his cap. The magistrate gave his opinion that no one was really to blame, and he hoped that Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom would add further sons to their name. At that mother got proper blazing. "And thank you, sir, kindly," said she. "What, waste all our lives raising children to feed ruddy lions? Not me." A couple of years later, Medgar Evers wrote a sequel to Albert and the Lion called The Return of Albert. You've heard how young Albert Ramsbottom at the zoo up in Blackpool one year, with a stick with an horse's head handle, gave a lion a poke in the ear. The name of the lion was Wallace. The poke in the ear made him wild, and before you could say Bob's your uncle, he'd up and he'd swallowed the child. He was sorry the moment he'd done it. With children, he'd always been chums, and besides, he'd no teeth in his noggin, and he couldn't chew Albert on gums. He could feel the lad moving inside him as he lay on his bed of dried ferns, and it could have been little lad's birthday. He wished him such happy returns. Well, Albert kept kicking and fighting till Wallace arose feeling bad and decided it was time he staged a comeback for the lad. So with his head down in a corner on his front paws he started to walk, and he coughed and he sneezed and he gargled till Albert shot out like a cork. Old Wallace felt better directly, and his figure once more became lean. But the only difference with Albert was his face and his hands were quite clean. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom had gone home to tea, feeling blue. Ma said, "I feel down in the mouth like." Pa says, "Aye, I bet Albert does too." Ma said, "It just goes to show you the future is never revealed. If I'd known we was going to lose him, I'd have not had his boots soled and heeled." Pa said, "Let's look on the bright side. What can't be helped must be endured. Every cloud has a silvery lining." And we did have young Albert insured. A knock at the door came that moment as father these kind words did speak. 'Twas the man from Prudential. He'd called for their tuppence per person per week. When father saw who had been knocking, he laughed, and he kept laughing, so the man from Prudential said, "What's there to laugh at?" Pa said, "You'll laugh and all when you know." Ma said, "Excuse him for laughing, but things really happen so strange. Our Albert's been ate by a lion. You'll have to pay us for a change." The young fellow from the Prudential said, Come, let's understand this. You don't mean to tell me you've lost him?" "Oh no, we know where he is." When the young man had got all the details, a bag from his pocket he drew, and he paid them with bonus and interest, the sum of £9 4 and 2. Pa had scarce got his hand on the money when a face at the window they see. Ma says, Look, it's Albert." Pa said, "Aye, it would be." Young Albert came in all excited and started his story to give. Pa says, "I'll never trust lions again, not as long as I live." The young fellow from the Prudential to pick up the money began. Pa says, "Hey, hold on just a minute. Don't be in a hurry, young man." And giving young Albert a shilling, he said, "Pop on back to the zoo. Here's your stick with the horse's head handle. Go see what the tigers can do." And now everybody's favourite Irish song, Molly Malone.
In Dublin's fair city, where girls are so pretty, I first laid eyes on sweet Molly Malone. She pushed her wheelbarrow over streets broad and narrow, singing cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, singing cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
She was a fishmonger, and that's no wonder. Her father and mother were fishmongers too. They pushed their wheelbarrows over streets wide and narrow, singing cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, singing cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
She died of a fever, and none could retrieve her, and that was the end of poor Molly Malone. But her ghost wheels her barrow through streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.